Alright, so here's kind of the whole rundown of the garage remodel project. So you can see how bad the floor is, and that was kind of initially the reason for doing this whole project, was just to do the floor, and then it ended up being redoing the whole garage. So first step was kind of getting everything cleaned out, and then really once we got everything cleaned out, realized kind of how bad the walls were dirty and nicked up and dents and dings and holes in the walls and stuff from working in there. So they did go through and rent a floor grinder and ground off all the old epoxy, got it down to bare concrete. You can see that we had this like old cream colored floor and burgundy trim and burgundy blinds, and we didn't really like the look of that, so we wanted to change that. Got everything stripped down to bare concrete, and that's what it looks like after all the grinding with the floor dry. So we ended up taking all that burgundy and wood trim and then changing that color too. This is the first coat of the epoxy, and you can see the light gray wall and the dark colored trim now. And then here's what it looks like with the epoxy and flake down before the clear coat, and that step turned out pretty good. So let's get into how we did it. Got my wife out there helping me. We're doing an initial mix on here just to mix up the pigment that settled to the bottom, and that took a couple minutes to do that. And then in the same bucket we're mixing in the hardener, and that ends up being about a full gallon. So then after we do 2 to 3 minutes of mixing there, we pour it into a second bucket so we can clear the stuff off the sides, and then you do an additional 30-second mix. So now we're dumping it into the second bucket there, do another 30-second mix, then we're starting to apply it onto the floor. So we only had one set of spike shoes. That's what came with the kit that I bought. So she's just kind of avoiding stepping in it right now as I go through and roll it all out. She's doing the trim and the edge pieces. We do have some frog tape around all the edges. So roll out the first 1/3 of the garage. We knew we had 3 gallons total of the epoxy to mix. So we did about 1/3, and then we did 1/3 and another 1/3. So now you can see I'm actually stepping on the epoxy and going back over some stuff because I have the spike shoes, so we thought that made a little bit more sense to do it that way. Now we're mixing up the third batch here to do the last third. This area was a little bit smaller than a third, so we think it ended up being a little bit thicker here, so went back over and kind of back rolled everything. That's part of the instructions, is once you get it all laid out, got to go back over it a second time and then back roll everything, and that helps it tack up again. So you can see the texture change, helps everything tack up again before you start to throw the flake down. So rolling all the edges now there, and now we're going to start throwing the flake. So I just used a little Lego bucket, and you can see her standing over there by the 2 boxes of flake. This actually came with 2 50-pound boxes of flake in this kit, so it's like full coverage. There's not any spots that get missed, and you have quite a bit of extra. So you can see just going through, and I'm trying to get the edges really good and throwing it at the sidewall, and wanted to get at least a decent coat of coverage before going over everything again, just to make sure that we weren't going to have any spotty issues. But there's so much flake in this that it's pretty excessive. You have a lot of extra flake. So then after laying out the flake, you got to go over and roll it. So this is just an 18-inch paint roller that still has the plastic over the top of it, and just kind of going through and rolling all of the flake into the epoxy to actually press it down and get it stuck down. Going over, rolling everything, getting it all stuck in there, cleaning out the crack. There's quite a bit of extra flake that was just stuck in the crack. Now I'm pulling up all the tape around the edge. And the whole process of masking everything off, doing the epoxy, laying the flake, and rolling it took us 3 hours. Alright, so here's the next morning. Set time for the epoxy was 12 hours before we're supposed to go through and do the next steps. This part, you can see we're actually able to walk on it now. I just put like some plastic bags over my shoes so I don't get stuff stuck to my shoes. Went through it with the leaf blower, blew off all the excess flake that was just kind of sitting on the top and didn't get any epoxy stuck to it. So now I'm going through with a metal scraper and actually scraping all of the excess stuff off. So kind of going through in a crosshatch pattern, one way scrape, then scrape the other way, scraping all the edges. And this is just to kind of, get off any loose or extra material that doesn't have a good grip to the epoxy. Going through and cleaning out the cracks again, scraping all the edges. And then I also went through it with the leaf blower again, and then kind of blew everything into that back corner and swept up all the edges, swept up that corner, and now we're ready to do the clear coat. So we ended up getting probably like 30 or 40 pounds back off. Like I said, it came with 100 pounds of flake. It does have completely full coverage, and we ended up scraping off about probably another 30 pounds. You can see the blue bag sitting over on the left side of the picture by the opening of the garage. That's 2 bags of flake sitting there that we scraped back off. So here we're going through and remasking everything. as soon as the first epoxy layer was done, as soon as we got done with all that, I peeled the tape off, and then as soon as we get done with the clear, I'll peel it right off right away again. So now we're starting to mix up the clear coat. This is 2 parts, 1 gallon per part, so we ended up with a total of 4 gallons of clear coat. And here we're kind of following the same process as we did with the epoxy, laying it all out in batches and then doing the edges, making sure we got the edges good, and then going through with a squeegee and then rolling over the top of it again. So this was just 2 sets that we did. So here we tried to do half the garage with 1 mixing set, and then we'll go through and do the other half of the garage with the other mix after this. This one was a little bit tough to get everything spread out. Even though we had 4 gallons, the floor is really textured, so it soaked up a lot of the epoxy, and it was a little bit tough to get it spread over, but we did get it spread pretty decent. Alright, well here it is. I would say we're pretty much, I don't know, 90% finished now. Got the floor all done. I can walk on it now. And it says 5 to 7 days for full cure. So we're probably going to respect most of that time before we start moving stuff in. But here's what the floor looked like. So this is a brand called Roll on Rock. And the flake is like 100% coverage on the floor. So it goes over, like the epoxy goes down, and then the flake goes down, and you actually have to scrape off excess flake. So the kit actually comes with 100 pounds of flake. So we did do the sides, we did the step, and everything is fully covered. I think the Menards kits and stuff only come with like a little bit of flake, where you just like kind of get barely any coverage. You have your epoxy floor, and then you just get like a little bit of flake all over to add some color. Open the door up so it's not so echoey in here. But this stuff, you put the epoxy down, kind of hard to see, but you can see that the flake then actually adds texture into the floor. So you do the clear coat over it, and now this thing is actually pretty grippy. So there's a good view of how grippy the floor is, or how textured the floor is compared to my hand there. So, and I actually got this recommendation for this kit from a friend who did the Menards kit, and then said if he had to do it a second time, he would use this brand because he knew someone else that used this. So took his advice and went this direction, and we're pretty happy with it. So we did also go ahead and do the baseboards, so everything matches, so that's pretty good. The other thing I think we kind of messed up on was how we applied the clear coat. So you can, in some areas, you can kind of see like some brush marks. So like this area here, you can kind of see a brush mark there because I went over it a second time in that spot trying to smooth it out, but it was already kind of tacked up and it left some marks there. So the way that you're supposed to apply it, we didn't really follow that instruction properly. So you're supposed to do like a thin ribbon and then squeegee it out and then move back through a ribbon and then squeegee it out and then back roll everything. So we kind of just dumped everything all out and then squeegeed it and then rolled it, and it ended up being applied pretty thin, so then we kind of really had to stretch it out. But these areas do have full clear coat coverage. It's just in some areas you can see it's like a little bit thicker, which isn't too bad. It's kind of hard to see, but other than that, I think that's kind of the only thing that we could have done better. This was like their 600 to 750 square foot kit, and this garage is 660. So it came with 3 gallons of epoxy, it came with 100 pounds of the flake, and then it came with 4 gallons of the clear coat. I also added on a kit that came with all of the brushes and everything. So we did end up buying extra 2-gallon buckets to do the clear coat. But other than that, you're able to mix it up in these buckets because this is a 1-gallon bucket and it came with 0.75 grams of epoxy and then a 1/4 gallon of the hardener that mixed into it. And it came with a 5-quart bucket and another smaller one just for doing the brush stuff. But we did also buy this other toolkit. This is an optional kit, but it came with the squeegee, the roller attachment, 3 rollers, and then it also came with this scraper, this big metal scraper for scraping the flake off. It came with some hand brushes, came with the buckets. So really all the essential tools to get you through the project. So we figured why not, because that tool attachment kit comes with everything that you really need to do it. Like I said, the only thing we added was those additional 2-gallon buckets for doing the clear coat, and it was only like another $150 to add on to the kit. So total cost for the whole floor kit with the tool kit was $1,250, and then we spent like $200 for the floor grinder rental. That was like $180 with the rental plus the usage for the grinder pads. Then I'd say we had like another 400 probably into like all the wall painting, primer, the patches, all that stuff to fix everything. So I'm just gonna call it under 2,000 for the whole project, or probably at like 18, 19 mark. So we'll call it under 2,000, and got pretty much the whole garage redone. Still gotta finish the little stuff like the wall plates. We're figuring out what to do with the doors yet. We wanna do like an exterior paint on the doors, and then still gotta do that one more top coat on the edging up there. But other than that, it's pretty much where we're at. The floor's all done. Really happy with how it turned out, and I'll probably wait a few days before I start putting stuff back in and start working in here yet. So that's it. Have a good one.